The culling of half of all life in the universe was perhaps the single most significant event in the history of the MCU to date, with the remaining population being forced to survive for 5 years through the grief and trauma of losing billions of lives, potentially trillions across the universe, friends, family members, and loved ones. Despite the immeasurable toll that this took on the galaxy, it had been a quest that Thanos had pursued for years, decades now, as he went planet to planet individually in order to purge half of all life in the galaxy, one world at a time. One of the most integral aspects of Thanos' plan, however, was that the decimation had to be truly random. No bias given towards certain individuals, even his followers, and his previous quest always had the same constraint despite how hard he tried. No matter how random he could make it, the selection of who was meant to live and die was always met with the same biased judge and was never truly random. With the Infinity Stones, however, he not only had the power to enact his goal on a universal scale, but it also allowed him to finally reach true randomization. In Endgame, we learned of his retirement plan for Nebula, stating that she always talked about living out the remainder of his days on a farm. Which brings up the question, did Thanos intentionally allow himself to survive the decimation, or did he simply fall into the lucky 50% that weren't dusted? We'll stick with us today, watchers of the Marvel Multiverse, and let's explore both sets of evidence to suggest that he both did and didn't shield himself from the snap, and then delve into which option seems to be the most likely. First, let's assess the evidence that he intentionally and knowingly saved himself from being dusted by the stones. While self-preservation is certainly a believable motive to save himself, there are far more serious issues to consider in letting himself potentially die that he might not be willing to risk. The primary problem with Thanos allowing himself to be dusted was that he would leave the Infinity Stones completely unguarded in his absence, as he would have been dusted away, but the gauntlet itself would have remained wherever he had just been snapped. While there was a noticeable delay between the snap and when people began vanishing that Thanos used to escape, it is currently unclear as to whether or not Thanos knew that this would be the case. If he didn't know about this delay, then it stands to reason that he may have simply vanished as soon as he had snapped, leaving anyone who was currently resisting him to claim the stones for themselves and subsequently undo the snap and the decimation just moments after it occurred. While he couldn't have anticipated specifically being in Wakanda and facing off against this front of Avengers, he knew full well that he would be met with resistance on his quest. After all, the reason he waited so long to collect the stones was because he had to track them all down first, and he knew that as soon as he started making moves for the stones, he would face opposition that wished to stop him from achieving his goals. Therefore, he had to pick his spot very carefully. It's only after collecting 2 stones that he removes his armor, and this seems to hint at a sense of renewed confidence that he is now too powerful for anybody to stop. But he still knew full well that he would have met with individuals who sought to stop him from culling the universe despite his immense power. Preserving himself would allow him to either destroy the stones or get them to safety in order to ensure that his goal preserves and is not immediately reversed if he were to be snapped. One might argue that he could also keep himself alive in order to maintain population control after the universe repopulates itself, but given his destruction of the Infinity Stones in the opening minutes of Endgame, it seems highly unlikely that he was concerned with this aspect of his plan, and seeing his reaction to viewing the execution of his future self, Thanos seems to indicate that he was not concerned with dying. With this, let's now explore the object and subject that he was actually prone to the effects of the snap, but he was simply one of the lucky 50% that survived. This option would be more in line with the Mad Titan's psychology, as he believed himself to be a noble savior that the universe needed, even if they didn't know it or accept it. While his retirement plan could be seen as evidence to suggest that he was planning his life after the snap, it's important to remember that he told Nebula about this plan long before he began his quest for the Infinity Stones. And while it's true that he was in the process of tracking them down, it's highly likely that this plan was hatched while he was still using the barbaric means of going planet to planet in order to enact correction. Given his lack of concern regarding his own death and what we know of his psychology, it's very likely that he wanted to give himself the same just chance as anybody else in the universe, towing the line between life and death and letting the stones decide at random. In fact, there is actual external evidence to suggest that this latter option is more likely of the two, as the Russo brothers themselves have commented on the matter. They cite his small smile at the end of the film and assign their own interpretation to what happened, claiming that at this moment, Thanos believes that the universe deemed him to be worthy of living, and therefore his conquest validated. This satisfaction, according to them, was the justification of the universe essentially stating that Thanos was right, and as a reward, leaving him in peace. But there is another interesting aspect to this theory in order for us to consider: the Infinity Gauntlet itself. The Infinity Gauntlet channeled Thanos' will and his own desires, using the power of the stones to bring his vision to life and grant his wishes. As far as he is aware, he is likely a survivor of the stones by chance, but it's unclear how much of this was influenced by his subconscious desire. If he subtly wished to live to retirement, or had a latent desire to survive, that he might have inadvertently affected the snap in order to protect himself without ever fully realizing this. And he may very well believe that he stood the same chance as anybody else, with this not actually being the case. This idea is actually reinforced by a previous fan theory that many avid MCU fans have come to accept, and the theory in question proposes that Thanos allowed 3 individuals to survive the snap, whether he consciously was aware of it or not. This mini-theory states that Tony Stark, Thor, and Nebula were all deliberately survivors because each of their lives were bargained for exchange for an Infinity Stone, and Thanos swore that he would let them live at various points throughout the film. Doctor Strange saved Tony Stark's life on Titan, much like how Loki traded the Tesseract for Thor, and Gamora revealed the location of the Soul Stone in order to save Nebula. All of their lives were bargained for, and therefore, maybe subconsciously, Thanos spared them from the snap. Again, it's possible that Thanos didn't outright preserve them of his own accord, but his promise to let them live affecting his subconscious mind and desires when he snapped his fingers, altering the snap and allowing the 3 or potentially 4 of them to live. While the intention behind this is currently unclear, it's still a fun possibility to consider nonetheless. But anyway, my friends, do you think Thanos survived by chance or willed himself to survival, whether intentionally or unintentionally? Do you think he intentionally let Tony, Thor, and Nebula live? And if so, do you think it was a subconscious desire that he didn't realize, or do you think he was fully aware of it? As always, my friends, thank you guys so much for watching the channel. Hit that subscribe button to assemble and join our team to stay up to date with everything Marvel related, and I will catch you in the next video. The multiverse of madness is upon us.